Good evening, everyone. I will call the meeting to order. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge the town of Edson is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral lands of the Niqawak, Saulteaux, Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and the Ipitimisoak Métis Nations. We honor the knowledge of this land, the elders and youth which gather here, and our ancestors who have gathered here for centuries. Can I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please? Go ahead, Councillor Holden.
I motion that the agenda for the April 7th, 2026 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. Can I get a motion, please, for the adoption of the minutes of the March 17th regular meeting of council? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I move that the minutes of the March 17th, 2026 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns with said minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. We have no public hearings, no presentations and delegations, no bylaws. We'll move on to item G, business items. The first is presented by Clayton Kitlitz, Acting General Manager of Community and Protective Services with Chelsea Rudolph, ISL Engineering and Land Services, and Tom McCormick of Metro Economics. We'll hand things over to Mr. Kitlitz. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Well, you kind of took my introduction. I was going to introduce this item. As the Mayor said, Chelsea and Tom are with us virtually, and they will provide us an overview of the population and employment projections that were completed as a body of work to support our municipal development plan rewrites. So I'll turn it over to Chelsea.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'm sharing my screen with our presentation now. Okay, perfect. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. As you know, my name is Chelsea Rudolph with ISL Engineering, and I'm joined by Tom McCormick of Metro Economics, who is a sub-consultant with us on the Municipal Development Plan Update Project. And we are here this evening to chat with you about some population and employment projections that were prepared as part of this project. So through tonight's presentation, we'll go over a bit of background context for the purpose for the population and employment projections. Then I'll hand it over to Tom, where he will present the population and employment projections that he prepared, and then we'll chat about some next steps. So really the purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide the context for why we updated the population and employment projections as part of the Municipal Development Plan update. We'll present the findings of Edson's population and employment projections, and then request direction from council on how the projections will inform preparation of the new municipal development plan. So a little bit of context on how population and employment projections connect to municipal development plans. So I think as you know by now, municipal development plans provide a vision and policies to guide decision-making related to future land use, growth, and development. That means that the policies within the municipal development plan need to be feasible and realistic to enable effective and informed decisions. Therefore, understanding how the population is expected to grow and maybe potential changes to the employment sectors can help us develop feasible and realistic policies that will enable communities to address anticipated challenges while also capitalizing on expected or upcoming opportunities. And just a bit of context about projections themselves and some caveats to preface the conversation. Projections are a tool that suggests potential future scenarios based on historical data trends and defined assumptions. So different methodologies, different data sources, and applied assumptions will generate different results. So it's important to note that projections are not intended to function as a prediction of what will happen, but they do present a potential future of what could happen under a set of defined assumptions. And along with any kind of technical analysis, there are some primary limitations that we like to note. The two main ones are the age of data and accuracy of data. So that's just to say, depending on the age of the data you're using and how accurate it is, obviously, if you're basing your analysis off that information, will have an impact on the results that are generated. So projections are just one input that we are using to consider while we're updating the municipal development plan, in addition to things like best and promising practices, community feedback, organizational priorities, amongst other things. So when looking at Edson's current municipal development plan, which was completed in 2016, there are a set of existing population and employment projections that were completed as part of that work. These projections that are in here that you're seeing on the screen were actually produced in 2014. And at that time, they were projecting a 1% annual growth rate for the town, which effectively would lead to a population change from about 8,475 in 2011 to over 11,000 in 2040. And as a result of those projections, they were also expecting to see an increase of approximately 575 jobs by 2021. And you can see the image on the screen, how it's 1% growth every year, obviously is trending upwards. So fairly consistent growth over the projection period. Now, obviously, it's been over a decade since the municipal development plan was updated and over a decade since the population and employment projections were prepared. So we wanted just to take a look at how the data was trending basically since those projections were created. So you can see how in 2011, the federal census reported a population of 8,475. And then back in 2021, it was reporting a population of 8,374. So as mentioned on the previous slide, the population and employment projections that were prepared back for the 2016 update, we're projecting a 1% increase year over year. And you can see that actually the trends from 2011 to 2021 was a decrease overall of negative 1.2%, and then a compound annual growth rate of negative 0.12%. And then a similar trend is following for jobs. So I just wanted to include this slide here to show, it's not to say like the previous projections were wrong. Obviously, they were using the information that they had at the time, and they were looking at a set of historic kind of growth patterns from the years prior. This is all kind of just to say that the trends that were expected about a decade ago are not exactly what we've seen over the last 10 years. And so, what does this mean in a context of the municipal development plan? So, where this leads us to today is that because current municipal development plan policies were written from a perspective of, okay, we're expecting to see growth year over year for the next decade or 20 years, the policies might be more growth oriented than what current population and employment projections are suggesting. And that means that the way the policies are written may be impacting decisions related to future growth and development that may not address current community needs. And at this point, I will hand it over to Tom so he can share his findings of his work.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. So we're on the board. Would you advance to the first slide, please, Chelsea? So a word about making projections. The standard approach by most firms is to use what we know of as an age cohort model, which simply starts with a known base year set of data regarding the population of an area, both by its age structure and by its gender. And to that base year set of data are applied a reasonable set of expectations about fertility rates by age of mother and mortality rates right across the age spectrum of the population. And then you apply to those assumptions an assumed path for net migration into the community. And on the basis of that set of assumptions, you generate a set of projections into the future as far as you want to go. Now, we also follow that approach at Metro Economics. However, we make a very, very distinct change to the way the migration assumption is achieved. We are analysts of community welfare and community well-being in terms of the economy and incomes being earned by people. And we think that the future growth of a community is determined more by the ability of that community to generate jobs in those industries that are the underpinning industries of that area. And so we don't assume what future migration is going to be. We drive future migration in our age cohort models by a set of economic considerations. So we sit down, we look at the data from the most recent period, which in this case is the 2021 census. We look at the jobs that are in your area. We determine the extent to which jobs are supplying goods or services to communities outside your area, because it's growth in what we call your economic base job industries that will determine whether you grow in the future. And we then look into, we do projections right across Canada, provincially, by census division and by municipality. And we then look at our province-wide projections by industry for jobs, and we determine whether the economic-based jobs in your community are going to grow in the future, and then determine whether you're going to need more people to fill those jobs, or whether in fact those jobs are going to grow at all. So we can go to the next slide. When we talk about the industries that drive the economies of individual communities, historically, we've always thought of agriculture or mining or manufacturing as being the industries that sort of carve out where people geographically choose to live. More and more, those industries are not the economic drivers of communities, but in fact, we have higher levels of education or higher levels of health care. We have a very sophisticated financial organizations or other sorts of business services that themselves are driving job growth in many parts of the country. So we have now what we call an exportable services sector. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea that tourism can also be a driver of economic development in an area. We don't really have a tourism industry defined by all the numbers that are put together by StatsCan, because tourists are temporary visitors to a community, and when they're there, they live in some sort of accommodation, they eat food at local restaurants, they participate in recreational activities in the area, and they purchase souvenirs and clothing and other such things at local retail outlets. And so we have to look at how many jobs there are in each of those industries in the community, whether there are more jobs in that community than is really needed by the people who live there. And if there are more jobs than that, we call them exportable service jobs, or indeed, we sum them up and call them tourism jobs. So tourism can be a driver of economic development as well. And then, of course, you can have a federal government facility or a provincial government facility that is residing in a community that's away from the national or the provincial capitals, that also can be a driver of economic growth. Or you can have defense bases in communities as well. So these are the typical industries that we think of as economic growth drivers. Now we're going to take a look at Edson itself and see what the drivers are in your community. But before we do that, let's have a look at the external environment. I mean, we know it's a bit of a mess right now, without any question. You know, the way Trump has approached the execution of his plans to raise tariffs and change the trading relationships worldwide. Bottom line is, all of what has been done out of Washington has created a situation in which we are likely going to have a recession this year, or at least at a very, very slow pace of economic expansion right across the country. That will change if and when Trump leaves office, which we would hope would be around 2029. And when that happens, we would expect that the US economy will return to its long-term growth trajectory that we had expected it to be before Trump was brought in for the second term. So the US economy is resilient. It will survive the Trump years, and it will grow in the post-Trump era back at the probably underlying real growth rate of about 2% in terms of gross domestic product. We have one other issue that we need to think about in Canada, and especially, and that is the retiring baby boomer phenomenon. You're all familiar with the very, very strong number of births that occurred between 1946 and 1966. And over that span, the births were beyond the pace that had been achieved prior to 1946, and we had a full cohort, now known as the post-war baby boom generation, that is now in the position where, as of 2011, the oldest boomers were turning 65, and the youngest boomers will not turn 65 until about 2031, 2035. So we're going to be seeing a lot of boomers who are still working retire from the labor market, and as they retire from the labor market, they'll need to be replaced in the jobs that they held. And because they didn't replace themselves, because the total fertility rate, which was 4 per female when they were born, has been running at around 1.2 to 1.5 ever since 1966. So we have clearly not had couples replacing themselves in this country for a good long time, 60 years. And that means that we just don't have enough domestically generated people to fill the jobs that the boomers are leaving. So we're going to have high rates of immigration just in order to meet our labor market requirements. This is a phenomenon that occurred right across Canada. Just about every community that I've run into in my years of doing projections has a very strong baby boom profile attached to it. Next one, please, Chelsea. So let's talk now about Edson and some of the key demographic and economic variables that are driving the projections that we put together here for you. According to the census, as Chelsea pointed out, in 2021, the total population of Edson was 8,374 people. Excuse me. For some time now, StatCan has been producing a series called the post-census population estimates. What they do is they realize that they don't capture everybody in the census. They do studies to see what the undercount of the census has been. They changed the date of the estimate from mid-May to July 1 because all of our population estimates reflect the population on July 1. And the bottom line is that the post-census estimate of Edson's population for 2021 is actually 3.2% higher at 8,655. Now, that 3% differential is pretty standard across the country. And the age groups that are most likely to be missed in the census are males between the age of about 18 and 35. And I don't pretend to have an explanation for that, but that's the way it is. So the bottom line is there's about 8,655 people in Edson in 2021. Of all the population residing in Edson, 4,120 of them were employed. Employers provided a total of 4,420 jobs in Edson. So therefore, there weren't enough people living in Edson to fill all the jobs being provided by the employers of Edson. So there was an implied daily in-commute of about 300 people per day into Edson from the surrounding district. So the next slide, please. And this gets into what is your economic base. The total number of jobs in Edson in 2021 is shown in the first column at 4,420. And then I've identified for the 22 or so major industries the number of jobs in each of those industries that were found in Edson in that year. Now, using what we call a location quotient procedure, which I won't bore you with, it's a mathematical ability for us to determine what jobs in each of those industries can be seen to be providing either goods or services to people outside of Edson. Now, it's obvious, I think, to most people that most of what your agriculture and other primary sectors are doing, or your mining and oil gas sectors are doing, even your manufacturing industries are doing, most of those are producing goods that aren't being consumed by people in Edson. They're being shipped to other communities or other countries right around the world. So we attribute all the jobs in agriculture, in mining and oil and gas, and in manufacturing to the economic base of the community. And you can see that's what I've done in the second column. We then calculate the number of jobs in all the other industries on a per capita basis in Edson. We compare the excuse me, we compare the per capita jobs in Edson by industry to the per capita jobs by industry in Alberta as a whole. And if there are more people per capita in Edson in an industry than is the case province-wide, we attribute those jobs to providing services or goods to people outside of Edson, because you don't overstack your employment base if you don't need to. So it's a simple assumption, but it gets us around this whole issue of how do we determine what else is driving the local economy. So when we do that procedure, we find that half the jobs in construction, or almost half of the jobs in construction, are, while they are provided by employers in Edson, are undertaking construction activities, not only in Edson, but also in communities nearby. On the retail trade side, 332 of the 760 total jobs are actually beyond the local needs of Edson, and therefore that represents a very, very strong tourism base, or at least the provision of retail items to people who live near Edson and come in and shop in Edson because they don't have those retail services available nearby. Transportation and warehousing, there's a few jobs in that sector that we can attribute to the exportable service side. On the health and social service side, about a quarter of the jobs in Edson are beyond the local needs, and therefore are clearly supplying health and social services to people in the surrounding community. Same with accommodation, the accommodation and food. Half the jobs there are beyond the needs of the local community. So again, an indication of a strong tourism industry in Edson. And then finally, the other service sector, which covers a wide range of things. There are businesses in Edson that are supplying those services beyond Edson itself. And finally, there are more government jobs in Edson than you would find in the average community in Alberta, probably reflecting not local administration, but likely provincial or federal administration in the area. So bottom line, out of all the jobs in Edson in 2021, 1,749 of them, we think, are what we would call the economic-based jobs. And the rest of them, the 2,671 that remain, are there serving the local population. That's the number of people needed in Edson to fill the local needs of the population. So if we can go to the next slide, which kind of simplifies this a little bit, we've got a total of 4,420 jobs in Edson. We've got 1,749 of them that we consider to be economic-based jobs, which means that 40% of all the jobs that are provided by employers in Edson are economic-based jobs. And the biggest sectors supplying those economic-based jobs, not surprisingly, are mining, oil and gas at 380, and then at manufacturing at 345, and finally retail trade at 332. So there's a very strong industrial or primary sector orientation to the economic-based jobs that are found in Edson, and as well there's strong signs of tourism or the provision of services to people in nearby communities. So having said that, let's take a look at what we think is the future for the economic-based jobs in Edson. But before we do that, I forgot that we need to appreciate just how important the job market is to the community of Edson. If you take all of the jobs in Edson on a per capita basis, there are 528 jobs being provided by employers for every 1,000 residents in the community, which is way above the Alberta average of 401 and the Canada-wide average of 407. So clearly, Edson has a very, very strong economic base underpinning the activities that are there. As a share of all the jobs in Edson, economic-based jobs account for 40%. Canada-wide, they account for only about a third. So Edson is a very, very strong, relatively large economic base. And for all intents and purposes, because there's only a few people that commute into the Edson on a daily basis, the economy of Edson is really very self-contained. So it's got a strong base and it's self-contained. Next, though, we should look at a couple of the key demographic and economic variables. Now, I suspect you're all familiar with the population pyramid charts, but in case you aren't, this chart shows males on the left side and females on the right side, the total number for each 5-year age category, from the age of 0 to 4, right up to the age group 90 and over. The blue bars represent the number of people as a percent of the total population in each group province-wide for Alberta. And the black outline represents the age distribution of Edson's population. For all intents and purposes, it's identical to the province. In other words, where you stand today, or at least this is actually based on 2024 post-census estimates of the population from Statistics Canada. Where you stand today is you have a population that looks a lot like Alberta, and that means that you don't have a top-heavy elderly population that has accumulated because of slow economic growth in the past, but in fact, it's just about balanced in the way that Alberta's is, and of course, Alberta's population is about as fast as any growing population in the country, if not the fastest. Depends on the year you talk about. So if we can go to the next slide. This shows what we think is going to happen to the economic-based jobs that you now have compared to what you have had in the past. This chart goes back to 2001. It carries forward to where we are now, 2026. The years 2001, 6, 11, 16, and 21 are all from the census. The intervening years are our estimates based on interpolating the data from each of those 5-year spans. But as you can see, 2006 was a very, very strong year for economic activity for your economic base over the past 25 years. But that since 2006, economic-based jobs in Edson have gradually been declining from just under 2,500 to about 1,700 and 1,800 at the current time period. So there has been a steady decline in the number of economic-based jobs in the community over the course of the period since around 2006. And according to our projections, if we project primary jobs, industrial jobs, tourism jobs, commercial jobs, and institutional jobs in Edson, in the future at the pace that we expect those jobs to grow province-wide, it means that the economic-based jobs of Edson are going to drop from where they are today, around 1,800, to something in the order of 1,300 or so by the time we get to 2051. Next slide, please. So as you can see, this declining economic base job situation since 2006 has meant that the total population, which is the solid blue line at the top of this chart, has been wavering, slightly declining, slightly picking up, reaching something in the order of the 8,500 or so that we were talking about, 8,800, I guess, as of this year. But that because it's going to steadily decline in the future, we think, now we'll have more to say about that later. That means that the population of Edson is likely to decline from its current level of just below 9,000 to something below 7,000 by the time we get to the year 2051. The dotted line below that is the number of people who are 15 years of age or older. That's the group of people from which we draw the labor force. The labor force itself is indicated by the dotted line that is below that one. And it follows, obviously, the number of people 15 and over as the number of employed on a place of residence. That's what POR stands for. And the number of jobs on a place of work basis, which is the blue line. And that's simply a representation of the previous chart that we just saw. Those jobs are just, it's because the jobs are declining, it is very, very likely that the population of Edson will drop. So we're saying that it will move from about 8,700 in 2025 to about 6,600 in 2051. And when you look at the age distribution of the population, I mean, right now in 2026, we have a relatively small share of the population in the blue and gray areas at the top. That's all the people who are over the age of 45. But because of the declining job prospects in the community, what happens when that occurs in a community is that the younger people leave because they're mobile and they need to find work elsewhere. So they go to the major urban centers, Calgary, Edmonton, or places like Vancouver, to find jobs because there aren't any in Edson for them to fill. And the rest of the folks remain in place for the most part because this is where they grew up, this is where they carried out their careers, and this is where they want to stay to be with their friends, etc. So what happens in a situation like that is that the age distribution of the population clearly tilts towards those over the age of 45 and away from those under the age of 45. So you have serious implications for the number of students, because you don't need as many school places as you have now, but you need a lot more beds in hospitals and a lot more healthcare to take care of the growing number of people who are in the higher age bracket. So that's the situation that we think you face at this point in time, based on our assessment of the external environment for Edson over the course of the period to 2021. Now, if we just compare the numbers in 2021 to our projection for 2051, we're talking about a 2,000 decline in population, and the population of people 75 and over goes up by 800 because those are the folks that stay and those are the folks that age in place. The ones that are mobile, they leave, and those are the people under 20, and they go with their parents who are between the ages of 20 and 74. So you're looking at a decline in total population of 2,000, but a decline in population of those up to the age of 74 of about 2,800. Now that means that fewer dwellings will be required in 2051 than was the case in 2021. That just means that you've got to build some in order to meet the current needs of the people, because the population is still growing and households are still growing, but that's about to come to a halt. And by the time we get to 2041, you'll need 100 units less than you have in 2031. And by the time you get to 2051, you'll need 300 units less. So clearly some juggling and figuring out of how to handle the housing needs in the community will be required in order to plan that far ahead for the units that will be needed. If we look down at the employment by place of work, we're really talking about declines in every single sector, but mainly, they're spread out into the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. And so we can go to the next chart, or next table, I think it is, but this one shows what happens when we relax the assumptions a little bit about our forecast. And we assume that the economic-based jobs grow by about 0.25% faster per year. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but it means after 4 years, they're 1% higher than we projected in the base case. By 8 years, they're 2% higher, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a significant accumulated impact when you assume a faster growth rate of 0.25%. And of course, we do the same thing on the low side. We say, what if things grow only 0.25% less than we're projecting in the base case? The population isn't dramatically different. It certainly doesn't look a whole lot better. We're talking about a difference of 6,600 in the base case, 7,000 in the high case, and 6,300 in the low case by the time we get to 2051. Now, there is an alternative view that we really need to consider, and that is done in the next slide. The province of Alberta does its own projections of the population of both the province as a whole and of the various census divisions, counties, et cetera, throughout the province. Now, the Alberta government has a more ambitious expectation than we do at Metro Economics about the total population of the province. By the time we get to 2051, the Alberta projection calls for 6.9 million people. Our projection calls for 6.1 million people. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong, and I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying that their projection clearly should be considered. And if we do that in the next slide, and we also consider what they're saying about the local governing area of Edson in their projections, they are their projection, if we assume that Edson would continue to account for about 56% of the Edson LGA area in the period between now and 2051, the province's projection would also call for a decline in Edson's population, but the decline would be to about 8,000 people instead of to 6,600 people, as we are suggesting in our projection. Next slide, please. So our base case projection says 2,000 fewer over the period from 2021 to 2051. Alberta government's projection implies that Edson's population would likely be about 600 lower. Now, I'm the first one to admit that just about every long-term projection is wrong. And my friend David Foote, who I suspect you all know of David Foote, the famous demographer from the University of Toronto who wrote Boom, Bust, and Echo about 25 years ago. His favorite saying is the best projection is the one that's wrong, because people responded to what they're saying and they didn't like what they were seeing. And so they took actions policy-wise and other to make sure that things didn't end up the way that base case projection was suggesting. So understand that the base case projection that I'm putting forward here is based on what appears to be the most likely outcome of industrial development nationwide, Alberta-wide, and Edson-wide over the course of the next 30 years. It could be different. And let's look at a couple of the reasons why it might be different. This is a bit complicated to address in any detail, but this table and the table on the next page basically say the following, that you have an economic base that is really quite strong, but it's not exactly looking very good for the course of the next 25 years. If it's going to change, it's going to have to change by having policies that expand that base, expand the number of jobs that there are in Edson. And that's not going to be an easy thing to do when it looks like on a national and provincial basis, the jobs that you're trying to find are disappearing fairly rapidly nationally and provincially. Or you can diversify, and everybody wants to diversify. So everybody's going after the the pharmaceutical chemicals, or there's just hundreds of things, artificial intelligence, you name it. Everybody wants to do it. We all know which are the industries that are going to grow in the future. It might be a bit of a challenge to get some of them to come to Edson because of its relatively rural location, but that's not to say it's impossible. But the bottom line is, if you can get an expansion in your economic base, or you can diversify into other areas, then not only do you get new jobs in those areas, but you get construction jobs in the meantime that then generate jobs, at least in the short term, and economic activity. Now, I think if we go to the next slide, it'll probably best represent the things that I have left to say, and that is, we have a very, very difficult situation on our hands that has been generated by the Americans and the Americans only, and that is that they're withdrawing from the world. They don't want to trade with the rest of the world. They see themselves as pretty much being able to take care of all of their own needs, energy-wise, et cetera, and we all know the story there. The bottom line is Canada is a major exporter, and if we don't export, we don't grow, because the things that we export are things that are above and beyond our national and provincial needs. We're therefore looking for expansion markets in the areas of food and in the areas of energy, both of which we're really good at, both of which Alberta's really good at, both of which Edson is likely very good at as well. And therefore, there's a potential, based on the strong efforts of our federal government, to pivot away from America towards all these other markets around the world that Mark Carney's been chasing for the last 7 or 8 months. If we're successful at getting those markets, there could be an expansion in the economic base of Edson, Alberta, and Canada in a way that we didn't represent in these projections. So that's one of the major areas of hope, I think. So I'll just finish by saying, your economic base is incredibly diverse. You have an incredibly self-contained economy. You are extremely well connected, both to Eastern Canada and Western Canada, and therefore to the export markets right around the world. And so I hope that my projection turns out to be wrong, but that's the best I can show you at this time.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. I just have a couple slides just to finish out, and then we'll hop over to questions. So in terms of the next steps for the Municipal Development Plan project, at a baseline, we hope to capture the current state of Edson today and note the factors that are expected to continue influencing the community in the future. And then obviously the hope is that we're writing policies and have a narrative in the document that really support the town in making responsible and strategic decisions related to future growth and development. And then just to close us out on our request for decision, I will hand this back over to the Acting General Manager of Community and Protective Services.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Okay, thank you, Chelsea and Tom, for your presentation. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, we've prepared 2 recommendations, or motions for Council to consider tonight. The first is that Council accepts the population and employment projections as information. And secondly, that Council directs administration to use these projections to inform a municipal development plan update. And with that, we'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor, for any questions council has.
Thank you, Mr. Kitlitz, and thank you, Mr. McCormick and Ms. Rudolph, for your presentation this evening. We will hand things over to council. Do you have any questions or comments regarding the presentation? Deputy Mayor Fogarty.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the work that you did on this. I guess my first question would just be, and maybe it's a too big a question to answer simply, but you mentioned at the beginning the different methodologies that are used to make these projections. Are the methodology
Sorry, I lost sound on my end, and the question cut out.
so?
Could you repeat, please?
Sure. Again, might not be an easy question to answer simply, but you mentioned the different methodologies that are used for arriving at these sorts of projections. Are the methodologies that you use significantly different than the previous methodologies that produced those numbers that didn't come to fruition with the larger population growth and so on that the previous municipal development plan would have been based on?
That's a very good question, and I really can't answer it because I don't know what they did to prepare those projections. My guess would be that they followed a procedure like that I described right at the beginning, which is to use an age cohort model, but then to make an assumption about what net in-migration will be in Edson over the course of the period up to 2041. And what usually happens when someone uses that procedure, they extrapolate into the future at a rate equal to the rate of in-migration in the past. So what they expect to happen over the next 30 years is what they saw happen over the last 30. And we instead, I think, take a more realistic approach and say, hey, people move around in Canada because of economic opportunity. Canada captures economic opportunity when it can. Canada invites immigration when we need workers, etc. So taking those kinds of things into consideration, our models tell us that on a national basis, Canada's going to do okay. But because of your unique dependence on the primary sector, mining, oil and gas, which is a sector that's growing, but isn't creating a lot of jobs because it's so capital intensive. So what we used to think of as mining jobs driving individual communities no longer do that, even though they are thriving mining companies, because they do it so much better than they used to do it in the past. Okay, so I know that's a bit of a complicated answer to what you asked, but I think that, by taking these factors into account, we give you a better view of what your future is than if somebody was to give you a projection that said, hey, you had this much in-migration in the past, this is what you should get in the future.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have questions? Councillor Holden, go ahead.
Yes, through the mayor to our presenters and to council. More of a comment than anything. I do understand the population drop is done by census numbers. A lot of this is driven by the current economics, in my mind anyways, because a lot of the young families in town are just not able to afford multiple children. It's across Alberta, across Canada, it's been driven by the federal policies that are just restricting economic growth in Alberta. If we see a future change in these policies, I believe that Edson's position as a regional energy hub will allow growth to happen, not restriction. I honestly think we're on a point in time in the next 3 years that will tell us whether we're going to. And again, the projections are saying opposite of what I'm thinking. The other thing would be that the 9 years of stats, unfortunately, have been under one federal policy platform, and when we have hopefully the reductions or eliminations of the tariffs from the U.S., Will we have an Alberta that's able to get our resources to Tidewater and to the world? In which case, as we know in Edson, if you lived here in 2004, 5, 6, 7, and prior to the crash in 8, this place was absolutely insane and rocking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to our presenters and to council as well. This is more of a comment and just in response to the information that we received in terms of how it impacts the municipal development plan. Obviously, we have to consider this information, and in terms of municipal development plan, when you see a sort of a drop in population, we have to consider that we should be maintaining certainly what we have. That being said, I appreciate what our presenter said, that if we don't like the information that we've been given, then we have an opportunity to change that for the future. And that actually ties back to our strategic plan to say what we need is economic growth. And that's the way these numbers will change. Councillor Holder certainly alluded to that with certainly policies that are beyond our control, but we need to get serious about economic growth in this community if we're going to see these numbers change. So in the meantime, with the numbers that we have and this information, we still need to maintain what we do have in town and then focus on economic growth. So those are my comments.
Councillor Wilson-Lear.
Through the mayor to administration and our presenters, thank you very much for your presentation again. I just wanted to echo what the previous councillors have said around the table. Edson can be a bit of a tricky community, as we've seen over for us if we've lived here for many, many years. We used to have a pretty big shadow-based community, and those, I think, fed a bit of our numbers and fed our retail, our hotels, our tourism, those kinds of things, and we've seen a vast decline since those years in 2002, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the horrible crash of 08. I just wanted to say, as it relates to feeding the MDP, with the projections, navigating the challenges of current data-driven projections that you've provided here tonight of a declining population and especially employment, especially as it relates to long-term municipal planning. It requires, in my view, a multifaceted approach to strategic planning while also being able as a council to pivot. And I think that was probably what needed to happen with the projections that happened last time. And I'm hoping that as we strategic plan for economic development going forward, that we're taking care of what we have right now and our citizens and that population base that we are going to have in terms of our infrastructure and planning processes and things like that. But we also do need to come at it from a place of being able to pivot if we do see future in the next few years. So I'm hoping that that's how it comes out. And that'll come with community engagement as well, which I know that that's a focus for sure for this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Schramm.
Yeah, to the chair, to our presenters and administration. And again, thanks for the presentation. Kind of going through your presentation, and again, I'm not going to echo a lot of things that have already been said relating to the economy, the previous federal government's approach to the economy in Western Canada. Those are all things that have to come into effect. When I do look at the numbers you presented, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me is today, Edson is way higher than the rest of Canada and way higher than the rest of the province of Alberta. So I guess to me, that's kind of an indication why are we anticipating such a big decline. And again, your research shows that, that may be there. One thing Edson has been famous for, and I've been born and raised in Edson, is a very stable economy. I always look at the big three, which is mining, oil and gas, and forestry sectors as being the big three. And I understand there are challenges in the future with those sectors, but they always seem to balance out. And like I say, it is an eye-opener that when you say that we're looking at a big population decrease, I would be surprised if we do see it. But again, we have to take the information you present seriously and take that approach to our municipal development plan to make sure accordingly that we take that information and move forward. But again, I'm pretty confident in Edson's economy. The numbers even show it. We're above average for Canada and Alberta, and we have been stable. So I guess my question would be, the projections for population growth in Alberta, are you thinking it's more large urban centers of that growth? Is every small community similar in structure faced with the same dilemma? That would be my question.
if you'd like me to answer that, in my case, that is definitely the case. And I draw your attention to the fact that the Alberta government projection for Alberta, which is stronger for Alberta than our own company has for Alberta, also calls for your area to see a decline in its population. Okay, so it's not just Metro Economics that's saying that, it's the Alberta government that is saying the same thing. So I appreciate where you're coming from, and I appreciate that you are making your assessment on the basis of the history. But when you look at what's happened to the economic-based jobs since 2006, 2008 in your area, it's been quite definitely downwards. And while that hasn't dropped the population yet, the population has stopped growing pretty much since that time. And if those jobs continue to decline, as we think they will, then I think the population's about to see a decline as well.
GM Kitlitz, acting GM Kitlitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and maybe I'll provide some context for the second motion that might help a little bit for council, and I'll ask Ms. Rudolph to weigh in if I'm off the mark on this, but I think by considering these numbers in the new MDP, it's not going to be a case where you're going to see policy that says, you know, the town's not going to grow, so we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's going to be more of a, I think what you'll see throughout the policy is that let's maintain what we have and be prepared in case these are wrong. Rather than saying, well, we're going to meet 20,000 people, so let's start investing in infrastructure to meet that. So it's going to be more of a cautious, take care of what we have and be prepared. And so I don't know if that kind of hits the mark, Chelsea, or not, but that's kind of what I think it would look like.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair to all of council, it certainly, like I said, challenges with the age of data, knowing that a lot of this is based on, you know, census data from 2020, 2021. We're in a census year right now in 2026. We're using the information we have to best inform this decision. But I think once the next federal census data comes out in 2027, we'll have kind of a better idea of what's been happening over the last 5 years. And I think that will kind of help confirm if these trends have kind of continued, or maybe there's a lot of stuff happening that we just don't know, due to the federal census being the most consistent data set that we have. And so that's why we're kind of using that 2021 and prior. And the other thing about municipal development plans is that they are intended to be reviewed like regularly. So we kind of say every 5-ish years, although the policy is intended to be longer term and kind of still be applicable for a 10, 15, 20-year period. We do hope that communities look at their municipal development plans and look at what is happening every 5 and 10 years and just confirm if what's in here is still working. The last thing that I'll say is that we mentioned that projections are based on a set of assumptions. There could be a huge project announced in Edson tomorrow, and all of a sudden there's hundreds of new jobs and big industry, and there's a boom over the next few years. The projections do not factor what's happening on the ground today, or what effort the municipality is currently putting into attraction, investment, etc. So there's all of these things and forces and influences that are happening. The projections are kind of a point in time snapshot of what we found based on the data we use, which, like I said, is kind of 5 years old at this point. So we're doing our best to prepare with the information that we have, but certainly wanting to make sure that the town is ready and prepared for growth if opportunities do arise, and helping make sure that the policy will support town council and administration in making decisions that are strategic and feasible for you and the community in the long term.
Thank you for that, Ms. Rudolph, and Mr. Kitlitz for your comments as well. I have to say that when I opened up my agenda package on Friday night, when I seen this report, I was shocked. I almost fell out of my chair to see that number. But I was also, when you look at what the projection was under the current MDP, you know, I think that was pretty generous as well. But at the time when that was done, that was coming off a very busy time in our community. And I just moved here during the boom, and you couldn't build fast enough. It was crazy. It's like what you see in the Airdries and the Cochranes of today. So, those things can change quickly. A lot of those things are out of our control, as we see with what is going on down in the United States. And, I think we should be taking the data that you have provided here today and using that as our worst case scenario. I have a hard time believing we're going to end up in that situation, but we don't know the things that are out of our control. And it's really hard to have a crystal ball. We have seen in census data in the latest census, all the communities around us drop significantly in population compared to us. We did decrease, but ours was less significant than our surrounding neighbors, which is a positive. But I think this speaks to a larger issue that we have, particularly in Alberta, where, once again, the cities and the metro areas are getting the investment, they're getting the jobs, they're getting the representation from the various levels of government, where it's being depleted in rural areas. Some of that has to do with lack of healthcare, lack of education, lack of investment from levels of government. And I think that from an advocacy point of view, I think it's really important that we continue to talk about rural Alberta, particularly the industries that impact us, and ensuring that we are getting our fair share of the pie. Otherwise, there's not going to be a reason for people to move here. If we're not talking about the industries that are important to us, if we're not lobbying on behalf of forestry and oil and gas and those sectors. So with that, once again, thank you for your presentation. I look forward to seeing the full MDP once it is completed. Council, if there's no further comments or questions, I will take a motion from the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I move the council accept the population and employment projections as information.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions, concerns, debate on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. And can I get the second motion, please? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson-Lear.
I move that council direct administration to use the projections to inform the municipal development plan update.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? So just through to Mr. Kitlitz, so I have it clear in my mind, and based on what you said, and that was confirmed by Ms. Rudolph, the data that is being provided in here, it's going to be given, I guess, it's not going to be the focus of the MDP. It's going to kind of give some flavor to the MDP, if I'm not mistaken. Go ahead.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously there's a lot of work left due on the MDP community engagement, as Councillor Wilson-Lear mentioned. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, but absolutely, the point I was trying to make is that it won't be prescriptively, hey, we're going to decline a population, so let's prepare for that. I think I envision it being, it's going to contemplate this, and we're going to be very conservative in our growth assumptions and aspirations. But again, I think it's important for us to recognize this data, but also be prepared, because as we've heard around this table today, anything can change. So there'll be a draft, and council will get a really good look at it before it comes for approval. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you for that, Mr. Kitlitz. I guess my only concern is in today's world, people take bits and pieces of information and amplify it and turn it into something it's not. And I would hate for something like our land use plan or municipal development plan or other documents that we have that would have data in it that would suggest don't invest in our community because, hey, it's dying, which is not the case at all. This is just one snippet of information that we're using to inform the plan. So that would be my only caution as we are informing this plan and building the MDP, that the data is used to color it, but not fast and hard data that says, hey, this community in 2051 is going to be non-existent and don't invest here. That's my concern. So If there's no other further questions, comments, or concerns, I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Nobody's opposed. That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Next up, we are going to go to development permit DP 2026-009 for Reflection Supportive Housing Facility 24-hour service. And this is presented by Mr. Clayton Kitlitz, acting GM of Community and Protective Services, with a little bit of planning in there as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should have gave you the heads up. Ms. Darling was unable to come to work today due to illness, so I'm sitting in for her. So, one moment, please. Okay. All right. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This presentation relates to development permit application DP 2026-009 for lots 31 through 37 of Block 6, Plan 1494 AC, which is located at 4920 First Avenue. The application was submitted by Reflection Supportive Housing Center and seeks approval to extend hours of operation to 24 hours per day with a year-round overnight accommodation. Council has reviewed this matter, this application on March 17th of 2026 and requested additional information with respect to provincial oversight on this development, operational considerations, and also Council's authority to enforce or counsel an approval. This presentation hopes to respond to those questions and provide recommendations from administration in this regard. Subject property is located in a direct control district, open direct control district. The proposal does not introduce a new land use. Rather, it modifies conditions of an already approved use, being the supportive housing. The current approval limits overnight accommodation to extreme cold conditions. The applicant is requesting approval to remove this restriction and allow continuous year-round overnight accommodation as part of its supportive housing services. In terms of context, the property is on First Avenue, just east of 50th Street, within an established urban area. The parcel has previously been assessed and deemed appropriate for community-based services through existing land use approvals, which provides important context for Council's consideration this evening. From a land use perspective, this graphic shows the subject property and the surrounding land uses. I apologize, it looks a little blurry on the screen. But the land uses districts surrounding this property are primarily C2, service commercial, as well as business BI1, which is business industrial minor. Respect to review against our municipal development plan, the subject the subject parcel falls within the future central commercial area redevelopment plan as identified within our municipal development plan. The plan promotes flexibility in land use decisions to support institutional and community-based services. The proposed development is an expansion of existing community-based services, therefore, it is in keeping with this policy direction. Now, the MDP encourages the Development Authority and Council to apply reasonable discretion when evaluating proposals that align with the broader objectives of this plan. The subject property is designated direct control, which is intended to enable site-specific considerations and uses and operational characteristics. The MDP supports this approach by allowing flexibility where development demonstrates consistency with community goals, land use compatibility, and overall public interest. Council is well aware that this property is under the DC Open Land Use District, and this gives in this case, the authority to render a decision on development permit applications is with Council. Council is aware that there are no appeals by the applicant or the public with respect to a decision of Council on this application. In terms of enforcement powers, as I mentioned during the first time Council reviewed this application, there was some questions about Council's authority to perhaps cancel an approval if they chose to approve this application. Essentially, the answer is it's exactly the same as the Development Authority is under the Land Use Bylaw. There is the ability to cancel the permit, but only under two conditions, and that one being non-compliance. So the applicant or the development is not complying with specific conditions of the development permit, or if the development permit is issued in error based on some misleading information that the applicant provided prior to the decision. In either case, a cancellation must follow a formal enforcement procedure. In our case, with the town of Edson, when it's an administrative enforcement, our typical is about a 3-letter approach. The first letter is sort of, hey, we've been led to, we received information that suggests you're out of compliance. Please give us a call so we can figure it out. If they don't respond to that letter, the second letter says, hey, we haven't heard back from you. You have until such and such a date to come into compliance. If they miss that deadline, then the third letter is a stop order, which essentially starts the formal enforcement process. The stop order will say either stop the development, stop building, stop the use. And that most of the time gets attentions of landowners. In the event that they don't, then the next step is court injunctions to deal with the enforcement. So the short answer is there is the ability for enforcement, whether it's a council-approved development permit or administratively. The application did include a floor plan, which is illustrated here. The area in blue is a storage facility, which is under lease and was approved under a previous, an alternate development permit approval, and is not impacted by this application. The area in green is a proposed change from its current state to an office and boardroom area, and then the primary space in red is where the overnight accommodation and the expansion of use will occur in this facility specifically. There's also a site plan that's included with this approval. This illustrates the existing site, the boundary and the building, as well as the access points from First Avenue, the fencing, the locations of all the security cameras and lighting that's been part of a previous approval, but is still in place today. And it also shows the emergency access point for the site. Administration has prepared a list of draft conditions for council to consider. These conditions are addressing fire code compliance, security measures, site access, emergency response plan, as well as hours of operation, not hours of operating, but hours for public access. In addition, condition number 7 is subject to provincial oversight. Should provincial approval for 24-hour operations be revoked, this condition also requires that the development permit be revoked, and in that case, the previous approval on this property, which exists today, would become back in effect if council was to support this with these conditions. So in conclusion, the proposed administration concludes the proposal aligns with the municipal development plan, respects the intent of the direct control district, and includes appropriate operational and safeguards. The proposed change also enables access to provincial funding and expanded delivery of services to citizens in need of these important supports. Administration recommends that council does approve development permit DP-2026-009, subject to the proposed conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kitlitz. Council, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson-Lear.
Through the mayor to GM Kitlitz. First of all, thank you again for your presentation. And because administration provided the province shelter accommodation expectations as a schedule to the municipal development permit application and the development permit conditions and notes and explanation, it has answered my questions while assisting me as a new councillor in remaining outside of the operational weeds. It is there's very defined processes in there, and I thank you for that and for attaching that as a schedule. It also, I wanted to just comment that the alignment with the MDP's direction on long-term social and economic growth, while not requiring expansion of the current building and the planning footprint, has also assisted in my decision-making in relation to this development permit application. The only question I had, and it's one in relation to our previous committee of the whole conversations a few weeks ago, was just that at that time you had mentioned a yearly letter of support from town council or from the town of Edson, and I just wondered if there was confirmation that that is a requirement by the provincial government, just as an extra layer of, just, you know, as we were speaking about the revocation under the MGA, that would just be another option. But it's more for just clarity, that's all. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so that's a great question, and I'm fairly confident that is a requirement. I don't know, Ann, do you know that for sure? It is, yeah. I didn't, yeah, I didn't refresh my memory on that, but that's what I recall, that it was a yearly requirement, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Kitlitz, I appreciate the information you brought forward and in the package. I think Councillor Wilson-Lear spoke about the requirements of reflections. I had spoken about that last meeting. And of course, it's a good reminder that we control the use, not the user, right, with this. So my question is regarding the enforcement. How transparent is that process in terms of a community level? Obviously, this is a direct control. This comes to council as a decision-making authority. But when it comes to if letters are being sent there, typically that would just be between the development, the planning department, development department, and the user group. Is that brought to council as an information piece, or is that still between our sort of administration and the user?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think in typical practice, it would just be a confidential process. So a good example, if it, just regardless of whether it's a council approval or not, typically our enforcement involves someone providing a written submission saying something's not right here. So we keep that confidential, even from that person who submitted the complaint or the concern. The process is confidential throughout. Now, I can share that I have historically where a specific enforcement matter is quite sensitive. We've come to council. And the one example, I won't give any specifics, but it almost involved removing a family from a home that was unsafe. That's a pretty substantial decision, right? So there is times where you might bring something like that to council where there's some pretty significant ramifications, but generally it's pretty confidential for the most part.
Deputy Mayor Fogarty.
Thank you. Through the mayor to administration and the rest of council. I just wanted to make a few comments. Don't really have a question. The draft conditions that are outlined here are reasonable. Reflections has shown nothing but willingness to work with the town, and of course they have provincial obligations to meet as well, which they've done all the way through. So I've supported Reflections in the work that they've done since being elected, and I see no reason to stop doing that. I think this is important, and I think it's just going to provide even more help to those in our community who require their services. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fogarty. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to council and everybody sort of watching at home. This has been a long time coming. I know Reflections has been in the process of doing this for quite some time. I support the motion that's on our agenda to approve this development permit. I support it without acknowledge. I have to acknowledge the comments that were made at our public hearing for people that came forward that had concerns regarding this development permit. That's not what we were discussing at that time, but it comes up now. And some of the concerns they brought forward, I believe that this change will address, right? People spoke about having people sleep in areas in town that they shouldn't be sleeping in. Well, this 24/7 facility can address those challenges that we faced in our community, right? Some people spoke about crime within the public hearing. This also can help to sort of alleviate those issues with individuals perhaps out at night and those types of things. In terms of solving homelessness, I'm never going to say this is the solution to homelessness, but it's one facet of it, right? And it helps with that emergent care for the vulnerable individuals that gives them a safe place to go. It also opens the door for the Homelessness Task Force to focus on what they need to do to find sustainable supportive housing, which is the project that they want to work on. So long as Reflections can keep up with this emergent care, this 24/7 care, I believe then the task force can take the next steps. So I do want to thank their work on this, administration's work. I know this has been a long time coming, but again, I'm supportive of the development permit that's being presented.
Thank you. Councillor Schramm?
Yeah, through the chair to administration and to all the council. Again, I'm not going to rehash everything that's been said by a lot of council. I do support what they've said. It's very good to see that the original intent way back to the public hearing was to move this to a 24/7 facility with provincial funding, and that hasn't changed. And that to me is very reassuring that the Reflections is true to their word, that they're moving forward, and this is the only change they needed to get the provincial funding and to provide an option for some of the homeless who have those needs in our community. So I do support this development permit, and it's good to see it's coming to a conclusion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Holden?
Through the mayor to administration and council, I'm going to be like Alan, not really rehash everybody's comments. Councillor Schramm? Yeah, sorry. My apologies, Councillor Schramm. It was good to see the SAE, the shelter accommodations expectation in the paperwork there. For me and for a lot of the concerns that were brought forward, it covers 99.9% of all those concerns. So there is options if things go south on us, and I absolutely 100% believe that they won't. And I do believe that this has been a long time coming, and for those people who need this service, I think it will be a well waited for service to be provided to them, and I will support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I also will be supporting the upcoming motion. As I stated at the March meeting, not all homeless are criminals and not all criminals are homeless. And if there is an issue in terms of a criminal matter, that's for the police to deal with. Everybody should have a safe place to go. This will give police the opportunity and other agencies the opportunity to move people to Reflections if they are out in areas they should not be. If there are other issues, they need to be dealt with the appropriate authorities. To say we have a problem and then not do anything to address it is not appropriate either. There's never going to be the perfect location because if we move it to another location, people in those areas will not like it. So I do really appreciate Reflections' work in trying to bring people into the facility, to educate people so they can see it for themselves. I know that invitation remains open. And at the end of the day, this development permit is being approved by this council with conditions that need to be met. And if those conditions are not met, then they will be dealt with as laid out by Mr. Kitlitz in the appropriate ways. So we are following provincial guidelines, provincial policy, provincial philosophy on the recovery model, and I'm truly in support of that. So with that, I will take a motion from the floor. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fogarty.
I move that council approve development permit DP-2026-009, subject to the conditions set out in attachment number 3.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, comments, or concerns, I will call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And for those in the gallery, you're free to stay if you like for the remainder of the meeting, or we understand if you would like to enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. It's been a long process.
We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. As I have a conflict, I'll be removing myself from this discussion and hand over the chair to Deputy Mayor Fogarty.
Thank you, Mayor Zahara. So we're moving on to a presentation from our fire chief, Mr. Turpin, on the removal of the decorative island and cul-de-sac at 59th Street and 9th Ave. Fire Chief Turpin.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for having me here. So Yeah, we're going to be presenting based on a citizen request for removal of decorative islands in the cul-de-sacs around town that include decorative islands. The particular cul-de-sac addressed in the letter was on the 5900 block of 9th Avenue. The resident concern kind of highlights the new ladder truck we're getting. The concern is based around whether or not the ladder truck is going to fit. It is much larger than our other apparatus that we have in our fleet, so it's a fairly legitimate concern, of course. There was other concerns around general operations, infrastructure and operations in the cul-de-sac, but again, the primary concern was on the ability for the ladder truck to access the area. So the decorative cul-de-sac locations, or sorry, the decorative island cul-de-sac locations are 59th Street and 9th Ave, 57th Street and 11 Ave, 8th Ave and 43rd Street, and 43rd Street and 10 Ave. So kind of our process was a basic operational assessment of the fire department's aerial ladder truck dimensions, reach and capabilities, some conceptual apparatus positioning and coverage mapping within the cul-de-sac, a review of our emergency response tactics with an aerial apparatus on residential dwellings, and then provided by infrastructure was a high-level cost estimate for removal of the landscape tree islands and replacement with asphalt. So the specifics on the ladder truck is 45 foot 4 inches long with the bucket in the stow position. It's about 40 feet long with about an 18-foot outrigger spread. So the outriggers are the jacks that come out to stabilize the apparatus when we extend the ladder truck. But driving the truck, it's about 8 feet wide. It's pretty typical apparatus size. Other than the length, it does have a large tail swing and has a reasonable wheelbase on it, so we can actually turn and position quite well with it. Typically for general fire operations, it's not about where we get the truck, but it's where we get the turntable of the apparatus. So the turntable is the part where the ladder actually pivots. So it doesn't matter where we get the front of the truck, it matters where we get the back of the truck. That's the important part when it comes to positioning an aerial apparatus. It's dependent on that turntable location. And of course, that gives us the option to back into places and put that turntable where we want it a little more accurately. There's also some, adaptations we can do in some unique positioning things, such as short jacking, where we don't have the outriggers extended all the way. If we're operating off a certain side, like the opposite side of the apparatus, we can put the outrigger pads out onto the sidewalks, onto curbs, stuff like that. If we have frozen ground, we're even better off because we can put those outrigger pads anywhere. But generally, just some creative positioning, we can overcome a lot of obstacles. So here's an overview of the source cul-de-sac of concern at 59th Street and 9th Avenue. So this was just a visual done up by our phenomenal GIS tech that just shows the overall dimensions of the ladder truck, not including outrigger spread, positioned in the cul-de-sac. And the outer radius you see just shows a 100-foot swing, which is what our reach is of the ladder truck approximately. So it's 104-foot vertical reach, 98-foot horizontal from the center of the turntable. So that's kind of what you're looking at right here is 100 feet. So we went out and field tested this on March 30th. We went out in the evening intentionally just because that is when we assumed that most people are at home. So there's most vehicles in the cul-de-sac and we would find the most natural obstructions that we would find. And we were able to back the ladder truck in on the north side of the decorative island, basically right up to the furthest west driveway. We spread the outriggers out all the way. We had basically a clear landing of every outrigger at full extension. There was no notable concerns when we positioned the truck in there. Of course, if we can drive right past and park the truck and hit stop, it's much quicker, but this doesn't result in an impossibility. We can turn the truck whichever way we come from. There's an intersection nearby, so we can stop, turn the truck, and back in. It's going to take an extra minute or two. That's about it. Additional cul-de-sacs here. So we're looking at a very similar sized island, 57th Street and 11 Ave. Again, the same thing. We can nose into the apartment complex parking lot and then back down the street. Probably not as quickly as we can turn around in this cul-de-sac on 59th Street or on the street, sorry, to get into the cul-de-sac. However, it's still an option. And then along 43rd Street and 8th Ave here, this one is much easier to access. I would say we may not even need to back into this one, just depending on where it is. And then here on 10th Ave, near 43rd Street, again, kind of the same thing. It's not really a huge concern for us. Going back here, it's these two first cul-de-sacs. This is probably the tightest one for us. And we field tested it and there's no real issue for us. So kind of in summary, as far as fire department operations can go, the ladder truck can safely access and operate within the cul-de-sacs with decorative islands. We rely on positioning, not the ability to drive through. We're not a garbage truck. We don't do snow removal. I hope we don't do snow removal ever. but we're here to put out fires. So our job is to position the aerial apparatus, and I'm very confident that we can do so. We were able to field test it, and it proved that we can do it. The last point there, decorative islands can create limitations, but it doesn't prevent operations. It can lead to some difficulties, sure, but definitely not impossibilities. As far as snow removal operations go, I'll just speak to this on behalf of Donna. So all cul-de-sacs are cleared using loaders, skid steers, and tandems. No concerns were received from the waste contractor, and infrastructure and operations estimates an estimated cost of $35,000 to $50,000 each for removal of the decorative islands and replacing them with asphalt. And I believe the suggestion is that if we do one, we do them all. So at that point, we could be on the $200,000 mark kind of thing. Based on that, we have a recommendation that the removal of decorative island in the cul-de-sac at 59th Street and 9th Avenue is not deemed operationally necessary. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Schramm.
Yeah, through the chair to administration. Thanks for the report. Kind of cleared up some of the issues for myself. Again, those cul-de-sacs are a challenge with bigger apparatus, and obviously you guys went out and did the field testing and proved that operationally you can get in there and you can provide the great services that you will continue to provide on a daily basis. So again, thanks for the report and bringing the information forward.
Very welcome.
Councillor Holden.
Through the chair to administration, actually. Being that the cul-de-sacs are done by skid steer, loader, and tandems, are they done in a later time, or are they done in sequence as the rest of the streets in that area are plowed? Thank you.
Councillor Holden, I have our transportation manager here, and he can step up and speak on that. If you would please, thank you.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Holden, they're done at a later time. So the priorities are done, and then they come back with the residentials and do cul-de-sacs.
Councillor Wilson-Lair.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Fire Chief Turpin and administration, I appreciate administration's review and the field testing completed, as Councillor Schramm had indicated as well, with fire services and public works. Based on the analysis, it's clear that while the decorative island presents some minor operational considerations, it does not prevent emergency response or compromise public safety as per administrative review and advice. And given administrative confirmations, I do not believe removal is required at this time. I'm also mindful of the estimated cost of anywhere between $35,000 to $50,000 for just the 9th Avenue location. And then that has that potential broader implication if similar removals of the other areas would have to be done as well. So in the current fiscal environment, I do not support allocating funds for removal when the operational review indicates that it is not necessary. So thank you for letting me make those comments.
Councillor Taylor.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Council and Chief Turpin, thank you so much for your presentation and the work you did going out there to test it. I also want to thank the residents for bringing this forward. They had a safety concern. That's something that we needed to be aware of, that even that we could just test here to see if it was feasible. And that's it's a sort of a lesson to all residents. If you see something that could be a potential challenge, to bring it to council and bring it to administration's attention. So I'm certainly satisfied with the report here and not moving forward with any construction or demolition of any kind. I will say too, if the residents certainly maybe have an issue with the word decorative island, that's perhaps a different kind of story. But if you see sort of the disintegration of said island in some sort of way, to make sure you use the report or problem map to address some of the issues that you may see on that. I know I drove past there a few times and just went, okay, use the word decorative, interesting term. But that also may be addressed in future strategic planning and parks analysis that we're going to be doing in the future. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson-Lair.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Council and Administration, I just wanted to also note, and I won't indicate which cul-de-sac area that I'm referring to, but I have had citizen comments that are in favor of keeping them. It's the streets that they grew up on, and their children play in those or have certain activities that they do. So I agree that if there's problems, they should report them, but I do want to just note for broader public knowledge that there is people that are in favor of making sure that those stay in their neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just echo some of the statements quickly from other members of council. I think this was great. You got a chance to get that new ladder truck out there and test it out and really see how it was going to work. So I think your presentation shows us that the primary concern of the residents in this area are hopefully calmed, and they know that the safety issue has been addressed and that they should feel safe with the new aerial truck and so forth. So I'll thank you for that, and I believe that hopefully hearing something else from these, pending hearing something else, I would also be in favor of sort of leaving those island cul-de-sacs in place for the time being at least. Thanks again. Thank you so much. Can I get a motion from someone on council, please? Councillor Schramm.
Yeah, I move the council accept the removal of decorative island in cul-de-sac at 59th Street and 9th Avenue report as information.
Any further questions, comments, or concerns from members of council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you so much. If we could let Mayor Zahara know, I will turn the chair back over to him.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor Fogarty, for filling in. Next up, we are going to go to Mr. Brett Hawken, General Manager of Corporate Services, for the compensation for extraordinary circumstances or emergency events policy. Go ahead, Councillor Holden.
Through the mayor to council, I am going to declare a pecuniary interest and step aside from this conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Holden. Deputy Mayor Fogarty.
Through the mayor to council, I will also declare a pecuniary interest and remove myself from this discussion.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Fogarty. And now there's four of us. And we'll hand things over to General Manager Hawken. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. We're here to discuss the two policies around compensation for extraordinary circumstances or emergency events. Back on March 10th at the Committee of the Whole, we brought forward the two policies to Council, outlining how town staff would be compensated during emergency events or extraordinary circumstances. These came from the lessons learned during the 2023 emergencies, and the objective is to provide a clear, consistent direction for council, admin, and staff during future emergency situations. So why two separate policies? One is when we are supporting another municipality. The other is when we are leading the emergency because it directly affects the town of Edson. We deemed that it was necessary to differentiate between the two because both situations have different impacts to the organization. Therefore, compensation structure, approvals, and expectations differ from each scenario. Together, the policies outline how compensation rates are determined, how hours of work are defined and tracked, approval authorities, overtime tracking, vacation and sick leave management, as well as mileage and related expenses. We talked about this at on March 10th, but I do want to bring it back up again as it is a unique clause that we have built in, 4.5, only on the town-led emergency. And this is only when the policy is in effect. This is only when there's an extraordinary circumstance. And this is only when workers are working within the evacuation zone and are deemed essential in order to keep operations going or to help with the emergency itself. what the clause states is that each employee will receive 1 vacation hour for every hour worked, and employees may choose to have these hours paid out at their regular rate after the fact. Keynote is that firefighters are excluded from this as they do not receive vacation pay through their volunteer structure. So why additional vacation in addition to overtime? Overtime compensates for hours worked. The additional vacation recognizes the sustained responsibility, the disruption to personal life, the emotional and operational stress when dealing with a major emergency. And this was another learning from the 2023 emergencies where some staff could not work. They were evacuated. They got their regular pay while others stayed on site, carried the operational burden, and there was no additional compensation at that time. So this provision is addressing that equity difference from what we learned in 2023. This still is, these two policies are in alignment with both legislation and existing frameworks, does not affect our union agreement, does not alter any emergency authority through the MGA. It does not modify our existing emergency response plans. It's specifically focused on compensation approval and consistency for administration and council. These two policies are in alignment with the disaster recovery program and actually will support future applications. It strengthens our documentation and reduces the need for us to come back to council for post-emergency motions. For a refresher, the disaster recovery program may reimburse up to 90% of any eligible disaster costs. We made one very minor tweak from the policy, from when we came on March 10th. There is no change to the intent of it. The reason we made the change was to differentiate between a manager managing municipal operations versus a emergency management section leader managing an emergency. Ultimately, we just broke out the one clause to state that managers looking after operations, municipal operations, are responsible for municipal operation employees, and emergency management section leaders are responsible to schedule for people dealing with the emergency. Again, the intent is the exact same as what was talked about at the March Committee of the Whole. It just is better clarification moving forward. So next steps, that council approve both policy HE 13C as presented and policy HE 14C as presented. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, GM Hawken, for your presentation and your work on this policy. We'll open the floor to questions, comments, concerns. Go ahead, Councillor Schramm.
Yeah, to the chair of the administration, more just a comment. Great work on these. Again, you've done a really good job, and those changes that you've made and the wording makes sense. And it's great to see that, you know, this will support anything with the Alberta Disaster Recovery Program. It really fits in line with that. So well done. I think that's an important piece of this, is making sure that we have this policies in place for that recovery process. So good job, and I will support these.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson-Ler.
Through the Mayor to Administration and GM Hawken, just comments as well. I just thought it was important to mention, and thank you for your presentation both tonight and on March 10th. We had a thorough review of that Committee of the Whole meeting a few weeks ago, and I think it's important to note that we did go through those policies line by line. The policies reflect lessons learned from the 2023 emergency response, and the two policies, in my view, provide fairness for staff and a clear framework for council during high pressure and emergent situations. So thank you for that, and I will be supporting both motions. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Just to reiterate what everybody else has said around the table, that I think it's really important to have this policy in place, having gone through the emergency along with administration. There's a lot happening behind the scenes, a lot on the ground, a lot of stress, a lot of, I think, post-traumatic items emerged following our emergencies in 2023 that we had to deal with as an organization. Understanding that that additional vacation time is critically important following a traumatic event like that. You don't know what's happening. You're away from your family. You're serving your community under intense pressure. So I really appreciate that portion of the policy because it allows staff to decompress and spend some additional time with their families. And it also makes sure that we know what the playing field is going in, not trying to understand things afterwards. Everybody knows what the rules of the game are. So I'm glad we're going to have this in place. It's unfortunately we had to live through 2023, but I think it has really prepared us well in the event, hopefully not happening, but in the event something does happen again in the future. With that, I will take a motion from the floor. Go ahead, Councillor Schramm.
Yeah, I move that council approve policy HE 13C as presented.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor, that motion is carried. And Councillor Wilson-Lear, if you can get the members of council. Oh, we have one more motion. Okay, go ahead with your secondary motion.
I move that council approve policy HE 14C as presented.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor, motion carried. GM McDonald beat you to All right, spring budget revisions presented by Denise McDonald, our Chief Financial Officer. Go ahead, Ms. McDonald.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today, with the help of our Acting Finance Manager, Kelsey Schmidt, we'd like to present the 2026 spring adjustments. So just an overview. Just the background to the presentation is the budget was approved November 18th, 2025, and it included municipal tax levy of $15,008,258 and a capital budget of $52,418,315. On March 3rd, Council approved the 26 operating and capital carry-forward projects, which included operating of $173,685 and capital of $15,394,618. Spring adjustments are budget updates to address essential items such as cost escalations, maintaining service levels, new grant funding that may have been introduced after November, and errors or omissions that are required in order to ensure that we budget properly and establish the municipal tax levy. So I'm going to move that one forward. So this worksheet shows an overview of the budget to date. So the first column is the 25 operating budget compared to the original 2026 operating budget that was approved by council back in November of 25. There's a column for carry forwards as well as other motions of councils already approved, and the carry forward totaled, as I mentioned earlier, is the $173,658, and it includes the Small Community Opportunities Program grant for $44,000. And that will be used in 26/27. It also includes a security rebate grant program for $12,000, the Warehouser Trail connection design for $65,000, as that will be completed in 2026, and Eddie the mascot will be delivered in 2026. Cellular program and tower repair for $15,500, and IT evergreening of $6,000 was carried forward into 2026. Municipal facilities for exterior door replacement wasn't completed before winter, and so that $22,483 was also carried forward. Under the other motions included reducing the council budget of $10,000 for FCM and adding $25,000 for Christmas lights in the Millennium Park. The second last column is the spring adjustments requested to be approved today. What the numbers show in this slide is that the municipal tax levy increase in November was $15,008,258, and it remains at that number after spring adjustments. That's what's important on this slide. So I'll pause here for any questions on this slide before I move on to the next one.
All right, council, we'll open the floor to questions before Ms. McDonald moves on to the other slides. So my question is, my motion was about the Christmas lights. Is that kind of a placeholder number, or have we done some research? Because that seems a little high to me, but I don't know if anybody has an answer to that question. Go ahead, Ms. Cross.
This is actually a quote that our transportation manager got for the trees. So he did do some work into seeing what the cost would be down for the park area.
And do you know if that includes the actual Christmas lights, or is that just for the installation?
Through the mayor to council, it's for the actual Christmas lights as well.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else have any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, you can move on.
I always think green is go. I apologize. So the next slide speaks to the detailed changes to the 26 budget as well as an overall summary. So feel free to stop me at any point to discuss when I'm presenting these detailed numbers as we're going by sections. So the general government, we've included an additional $300,164 for correction of the tax incentive program. And that was in error, as the first 2 years are 100%, and what was entered into the 26 budget was the 27 allocation, which is 75%. So we skipped a year there, so it needed to be corrected. Also, there was GPOT was duplicated, so the GPOT was included in the municipal taxation area as well as a separate line in the budget, so we needed to correct that. $69,000 was added for the revenue sharing agreement to be similar to the 2025 amount, and $50,359 was adjusted to salaries for error in the summer student allocation. And what happens in that area is when we have summer student positions added, then they become part of our regular salary program, and they weren't added in after the first year. So this is the second year of those positions, and so in error, we have to add them in because now they're part of the program. Under human resources, we have $15,000 for contracted health and safety program support. It's funded from reserves, so no levy impact. Sorry, general government was funded by cost savings in other areas. So then protective services for police, we have reduced the police contract by $500,000, and we've set aside funds each year to support the future collective agreement. $20,000 was removed as it was duplicated. So as part of our contract, we are charged $20,000 for biological services. It was not only as part of the contract, but it was included as a separate line item in the budget. So we've removed that to make it more accurate. We're still being conservative in this $500,000 reduction, in that their year runs different than our calendar year. And so we try to do a better job in budgeting to try to estimate it by what they give us for the number of positions, as well as they true it up to actuals, and that true up falls in the subsequent year to when we budget. So there's a lot of work that we have done to better budget for it. And I think going forward, I think we have a better understanding of how to budget it and how to make sure that we're not over budgeting. So we're having us taxing more than we necessarily need.
I'll just quick comment on that, Ms. McDonald. I think too, we are going to see a lot of transfers out and in this year, so there's going to be various times throughout the year that we're not going to be at full capacity, which is also going to reduce our needed budget amount. And as well, the provincial government has raised various fines. So I think we'll see a little bit of a bump there as well for our percentage that we receive for traffic enforcement that happens within our boundaries that we're probably not budgeting for. So I think that'll be a positive for us as well.
Under Protective Services Fire, we've included $60,000 for on-call vacation pay obligations, and we funded that from reserve, so there's no impact on the tax levy. $4,404, we received a fire services training program grant, and of course the matching training expenses included in the budget now also. There's $11,641 for insurance for fire vehicles. So our insurance provider has provided us a new option for replacement of our fire equipment. So we looked at the two of the most the newest pieces of equipment, as well as the new aerial truck, and applied that insurance replacement program to those pieces of equipment, but not all of them. Because the other ones we'll be replacing are fairly old, and we'll be replacing them in the future.
So we're going to stop you there, Ms. McDonald. I do have a question to the acting GM of Community and Protective Services. Just in southern Alberta recently, there was a fire hall that caught fire and burnt down, and along with all of its equipment. Do we have any fire suppression in the fire hall? Have we contemplated that? We don't think that we might need that in a fire hall, but with a $2.7 million piece of equipment in there that would not be easily replaced, I'm just wondering if that has been contemplated or thought about. Go ahead, Mr. Kitlitz.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. And I don't believe I'm going to have a definitive answer for you, but I do recall Chief Milton presenting here, it might have been during budget in the fall, about a new safety and monitoring system for the fire hall for that exact reason. So I can certainly ask Chief Chirpin to help me with that, and we can get back a definitive answer to council, but I think it's in the works.
Thank you. That's I completely forgot about that. So that's good to hear. Yeah, just on the insurance piece, I think that's really smart of us to do, even though I know getting that piece of equipment would be pretty difficult on a quick turnaround. So sorry to interrupt you there, Ms. McDonald. Please continue.
Public Works Roads, $25,000 for in-house storm sewer repairs, $20,000 for garbage bin and cement pad at the library, and that will be funded through reserve allocations and therefore won't have an impact on the tax levy. When we're looking at utilities, this is a self-service department, so it's supported by user fees and not tax dollars. And we have removed $25,000 for the Tiffin smoke detection project. The original project was $100,000 and it was cut to $25,000. However, it's not cost effective for the contractor to mobilize and split the program into 2 years. Therefore, it's moved the full project to 27 and no impact on the tax rate as a self-supporting department. Under planning, $150,000 for the municipal development plan was added, and that will be funded because it's a carry forward really from prior year. It is funded by reserves and no tax impact. Under economic development, we had reduced $30,000 for the rural revenue stream, $11,460 for the business license revenue, and we adjusted the expenses by $20,500, and the remainder will be funded through other cost savings in other areas. Under community and social services, We had the warming center as a revenue and as an expense in the event that a nonprofit organization could not accommodate us in that area, so we've removed that from the budget now. Has a net impact of 0. 19,443 is the Yellowhead County cost sharing requirement, is funded by cost savings in other areas. So that was just a correction made that wasn't followed through in entering it into the budget. So we needed to make sure it was accurate. For requisitions, we have education in increasing 408,802, and also has a matching expense. At the time that I was working on the PowerPoint, I didn't have the designated industrial requisition, but I have received the housing requisition and it is decreased. So I know that in between now and May 5th, we'll be working on the tax levy, but included in here is only the school requisitions, in the changes. So there'll be more work to do that, and the initial work that I have done on the impact to the tax rate is that there's going to be, even though there's no impact to the municipal tax levy because of the requisitions being an in and an out, it does impact the education tax levy in that at these initial calculations, I have residential increasing by 9% and non-residential increasing by 13% in the mill rate. So to summarize all of these, you'll see on the left-hand side that the revenue, when we pull it together into categories by function versus department, you'll see that we transferred 185,000 from reserves. We reduced the GPOT by 213,412. Requisitions were added in for 408,802. We've also included the under levy from the prior year for requisitions of 37,000, as well as the reduction in user fees that you saw in economic development. On the expense side, our salary, wages, and benefits increased by 114,763. Our contracted services decreased by 403,849, and our requisitions had a matching increase as the revenue. The tax incentive program was increased by $300,164. So we end up with a net surplus of $10,178 as a result. Open for any questions before I move on to capital.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Council, do you have any questions for administration on this very thorough explanation? Great work, Ms. McDonald. I do have a question. This is for the General Manager of Infrastructure and Operations. Just under Public Works, you have $25,000 for in-house storm sewer repairs. Does this include catch basins, or is this something different? Because I know we have a number of catch basins that are not looking too great in various neighborhoods. Go ahead, Ms. Cross.
Through the Mayor to Council, it is my understanding this is just extra money that was an motion from Council to allocate towards any maintenance for the storm repairs. So it would include any catch basins as well.
Go ahead, Ms. McDonald.
Okay, moving on to the 26 capital budget. So this slide shows the detailed changes. For this slide shows the 2026 capital budget. You can see the original approved budget in column 1, and then the carry forwards of the $15,394,618 already approved by Council. It includes a separate motion approved by Council in 2025 for the sanitary upgrade that was misinterpreted by myself, and therefore the number was not included in the total budget. By including it here, it will correct that number so it's incorporated into future budget totals. The capital spring budget includes finalizing the Vision Park project to utilize the remaining reserve allocation for $216,012, and replacing the heaters at Centennial Rink for $65,000. The total spring capital adjustments amount to approximately $2.78 million, including that $2.5 for sanitary upgrade for B1. Open for questions on capital.
Thank you, Council, or thank you, Ms. McDonald. Council, do you have any questions? No questions. Go ahead, Ms. Beveridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to note that the heaters are actually a cost-sharing item with Yellowhead County. They are aware of the item, of their contribution that they would be to consider as well. So this is before us, of course, to consider for the spring budget, but they also have input into this decision as well.
Thank you, and it's also been a topic for the steering committee as well, as those heaters were not a part of the overall YCE budget, so this is more of a maintenance item. Just a question to you, Ms. McDonald. So, kind of backing up a little bit on the operational side, as you bring forward the tax levy to us in May, will that include debenture costs for the aerial truck, or will that be coming in the 2027 budget? I don't know if that's been considered with this final budget.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. That's a very good question. We plan to borrow the money after July, and that way the first payment will fall into 27. Debenture payments are semi-annual payments.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. We have no other questions.
Okay, I'll move on. Our next steps. So the next steps, administration will review the tax requirement, enter the changes for requisitions and any other revenue sources we may require, including use of reserves to assess the impact on the taxpayer, and prepare a recommendation for the 2026 municipal tax levy. The mill rate bylaw will be brought forward on May 5th. This timeline ensures a combined property assessment and tax notices can be issued in mid-May. And before you are the two recommendations that we are putting forward for your approval.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Council, any further questions, comments, concerns before I take motions from the floor? Go ahead, Councillor Holden.
Through the mayor to Ms. McDonald, thank you for the presentation. I know we had previously, during just preliminary budget talks in, I believe it was November, they had talked about a 2.71% increase on the tax. Is that similar to what the 9% residential and 13% non-residential? Does that work into the same numbers? I'm just wondering about that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor to Councillor Holden, the municipal tax rate is 15 million, which is 2.7 by itself. So in November, we proposed just the municipal because we do not know the other requisitions. And so when I mentioned the initial calculation for education requisition for residential and non-residential, that is for their portion. So now we'll pull it all together and see how much tax dollars will be impacted for the taxpayer. At this initial stage, it looks like most of the impact will be because of education. The housing evergreens requisition is reduced slightly. So we'll do that work and bring it back on May 6th for you.
Thank you. Any other further questions or comments? I think it's really important. We had this discussion at the Municipal Leaders Caucus here just a couple of weeks ago. It was a big topic of discussion about the education requisition and how municipalities are collecting that money but are not responsible for the decisions around that money. I think it's really important that we as a council and as an administration make sure when those tax notices go out that we are very forthright in the information on who is responsible for the large tax increases here, and it's not the municipality. We all want to see education, and this is the way the province is deciding to invest in that portfolio. So with that, I will take a motion from the floor, please. Deputy Mayor Fogarty.
I move the council approve the revised 2026 operating budget with total operating revenues of $28,315,469 and total operating expenditures of $43,323,907, excluding amortization of $5,560,540, resulting in a municipal tax levy requirement of $15,008,258.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fogarty. Ms. McDonald, did you have a comment you want to make? Okay, thank you. Council, any further questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. I am playing games with you because I keep turning your mic off and you don't realize it, so I'm sorry, Ms. McDonald. Can I get a motion, please, on the capital budget? Go ahead, Councillor Holden.
I motion that council approve the 2026 capital budget with total capital revenues of $70,593,944 to support total capital expenditures of $70,593,944.
Would you like to say that number again? It's a pretty big number. Council, any further questions, comments, concerns? I'll just make a comment. This is a very aggressive capital plan. When I speak to other municipalities, they ask me about our capital budget and they're blown away. A lot of that's driven by YC, obviously, and the partnerships that we have. But it's good that this work is going to get underway, and I know Ms. Cross is going to be very busy over the next few months, and her teams along with the rest of the crew here at the town of Edson. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. Moving on, thank you, Ms. McDonald. Thank you to the finance team. We're going to move on to council committee reports. Can I get a motion, please? The council accept the April 7th, 2026 council committee reports as set out in attachments 1 through 5 for information. Councillor Wilson-Lear.
I move that council accept the April 7th, 2026 council committee reports as set out in attachments numbers 1 through number 5 for information.
Is there anything that people want to highlight in their council committee reports, or does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to council, I just want to quickly highlight through my work on the ARC committee, the Healthcare Skills Day on March 26 was a huge success. We had a number of high school students who took the first day of their spring break to spend the day down at the hospital, learning a great amount of skills from all of our healthcare professionals, our doctors, our nurses that were down there, teaching them some of the roles and future career possibilities that they have. We also had a number of med students come down from Grand Prairie. I think about 9 med students made the trek for the day and were extraordinarily impressed by not only our community and the hospital as well, just by the staff. And many of them spoke about when they have to return and do a sort of a med student run at a hospital, that they would be highly interested in coming to Edson. And this is part of the long-term plan of ARC of attracting healthcare professionals to our region. And part of that is growing our own, attracting med students through that rural program in Grand Prairie. The challenge with that program in Grand Prairie is that they only accept a handful each and every year for that rural program. And some of the med students spoke and they said, yeah, it takes 2 or 3 times to get into the program. So advocacy to the province is that if we want to grow our own med students, we want to grow our own doctors, we're going to need more rural programs for general practitioners in this province. So overall, huge shout out to the organizers, specifically Sanaya Sakin and Allison Roth for leading the charge and having a successful day, and hope to see more of those in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Holden.
Through the mayor to council and everyone watching. Just to highlight it for the Community Futures West Yellowhead Business Walk, which will happen downtown this Thursday from approximately 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. And then I attended my first Yellowhead Synergy Group meeting on March 19th. Was notified that the Alberta Synergy Group is ceasing operations, winding it down. And the Yellowhead Synergy facilitator is retiring, and the Yellowhead Synergy Board voted in favor of a soft close with operations ending by December 26th. So I had suggested we put the group on hiatus, but closer was their decision. So that is a quite loss to the energy or to the industry in our area, and I hope that we can somehow revive it in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holden. Anybody else? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson-Lear.
Through the mayor to administration, I just wanted to make one note. The committee of the whole meeting on March 24th. I just want to acknowledge the work that goes into those information sessions and GM Kitlett's presentation on that night. Even though I was deathly ill and could not be here in person, I'm able to watch it virtually, and I'm not guaranteeing that you're not going to get some questions from me because that was a very important presentation. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I would have definitely been in person had I been able to.
Thank you, and thanks for those updates, everyone. I just want to make a quick comment to members of council as we are attending our boards and committees. We have a long list of them. Some of them are not Town of Edson boards and committees. They're external boards and committees. Before the organizational meeting in October, I need feedback from each and every one of you, whether or not it's value for us to be sitting at those tables. We need to have that discussion on a regular basis because we have to manage our time, our expectations, and if there isn't value being provided as a member of council, then we may look at removing ourselves from some of those external bodies. If there is value, then we can certainly keep going as we see fit. But I just want to keep that bug in your ear as you're attending those meetings, that we're not just going to meetings for the sake of going to meetings. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. Before I take a motion to go into closed session, can I get a motion, please, to extend past 3 hours, just in case our close goes extra time? And this would have to be unanimous for it to pass. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I move that council extend the meeting beyond 3 hours as set out in meeting procedures bylaw 2281.
It's like somebody read my mind. Awesome job, Ms. Williams. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. And can I get a motion to go into a closed meeting session, please? Go ahead, Councillor Fogarty.
I motion that the meeting move into closed session pursuant to sections 19, 29, and 30 of the Access to Information Act, ADIA.
Thank you. All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. All right, thank you for your patience, everyone. We do have a motion coming out of closed session, so we'll just wait for Ms. Williams to bring it up on the screen. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I move that council authorize the CAO to enter into negotiations for the disposition of land as directed in closed session.
Thank you. All those in favor? That motion is carried, and I will adjourn this meeting at 10:49. Thank you, everyone.